Over the past 3 years, I've managed to gain 40 pounds of total body weight without getting fat. When I first started lifting, I was a very skinny 170 pounds. And over the course of that time that I've been lifting, I managed to slowly work my way up to about 210 while still staying relatively lean. Of course, this doesn't mean that I didn't gain any fat at all, but I was able to minimize it and skew most of it towards lean mass, being mostly muscle, but also a combination of water weight and glycogen, which is naturally going to happen when you eat in a calorie surplus for a prolonged period of time. So if you're someone who is extremely skinny like I was before I started working out, then this video is going to be perfect for you because I'm going to teach you exactly how I did it so that you can just copy my success without making the mistakes. So let's just get straight into it. So the very first thing that I want you to do is get your mindset in the right place. And what I mean by this is you need to treat bulking just like you would any other diet, because that's what it is. It's just that instead of losing weight, we're gaining weight. So it needs to be structured and controlled just like you would imagine someone who was trying to lose weight. And the reason is because it's not a race. You don't want to just gain the 40 pounds or however much weight you want to gain just as fast as possible. I see way too many people make this mistake. They treat bulking as an excuse to just go off the rails and not have any structure. And this is a big mistake because usually what happens in that case is they gain way too much body fat and not much muscle. And the reason this happens is because there's a limit to how fast your body can build muscle, regardless of how many calories you're giving it. However, it's not the same with fat. So if your calorie surplus is too large, which will inevitably happen if you treat it like such, and you just eat a bunch of junk food and you don't control your calories, then what's going to happen is all the additional calories beyond what your body was able to use for building muscle is just going to get stored as body fat. So the goal is to be in a controlled surplus that allows you to fuel your training without gaining excess fat. This is how you keep a good balance of the ratio of muscle to fat that you're gaining. Now, whenever you decide to go on a bulk, you're always going to have to accept some level of fat gain. Like I said, it's going to be inevitable. But as you saw from my photos, it's not going to be that visible if you're building a lot of muscle with it. And the reason for that is because as you gain muscle with the fat, you're creating a larger surface area for that fat to spread over. So even if you just gain half muscle and half fat, which is still actually really good if you're gaining such a large amount of body weight in total. So for example, I gained 40 pounds. I'd say probably about half of that was muscle. Over the course of 3 years though, it doesn't look that bad. Like I still look pretty lean because of that muscle, even though I gain a ton of fat. And the beautiful thing is that it's extremely easy to lose 20 pounds of fat versus building 20 pounds of muscle. I can simply diet for 2 or 3 months and burn all that fat off while still having the muscle that took 3 years to build. So technically, even if you're gaining weight, if the amount of muscle you're gaining is proportionate to the amount of fat, your body fat percentage could actually drop or just remain the same, which I'd count as a huge win. But this is likely only to happen in the first few months or maybe year of the bulk because you're a beginner and you're so sensitive to the new stimulus of training that the amount of muscle you can build will be disproportionate. But as you get into that second and probably third year, that's when you're going to notice that the body fat percentage will have to increase a little bit. But that's still not that big of an issue because you'll have built so much muscle by then that, like I said, it'll still look good at those higher body fats. So my recommendation for anyone starting their first bulk is always to go with the 300 surplus and then adjust from there. Because as you gain weight, your metabolism will also increase with it. Meaning the amount of calories that you were previously eating to create a surplus will eventually become your new maintenance at higher body weights. So if you're 170 like I was and you're eating in a 300 surplus, by the time you get to probably around 180 or 185, maybe even less, maybe mid 170s, it depends on the individual, that total amount of calories that you were eating to get in that surplus will now be your maintenance calories because your metabolism has increased as a result of the increase in muscle mass and body weight. Your body's energy demands have increased because it's now sustaining a higher amount of mass. So I'd recommend monitoring your weight on a weekly basis, and only if you've noticed that it's stalled for 3 or more weeks, then I'd recommend increasing by another 2 to 300 because you don't want to be gaining weight every single week. That's going to lead to like I said, an unbalanced amount of fat to muscle gain, because realistically, you can't gain a pound of muscle every week. So if you maintain that for 3 or more months, you're going to be gaining way too much fat. Now, my next tip is going to be eating a whole food diet. Now, this one often gets overlooked because it's not technically necessary for building muscle or being in a calorie surplus, which is the reason why people often neglect it, because their sole focus is just on making gains and building muscle. But in my experience, neglecting a whole food diet, for the most part, is going to be a big mistake. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't cheat once in a while or go to the restaurant with your friends or family, but for the most part, you do want to be eating the same whole foods that you'd be eating if you were in a fat loss phase. It's just the inverse now, so you're going to be eating larger proportions instead of smaller proportions. And like I said, the reason for this isn't because you can't gain muscle eating a bunch of processed junk food as long as your protein is high enough, but it's because you want to keep your health intact as you're gaining weight. And just in general, being healthy feels way better than the taste of any junk food in the moment. You want to eat foods that are rich in the micronutrients that your body needs to maintain optimal function, because it's not only going to benefit your ability to train hard and then recover, but it's also going to benefit your energy levels, your mental health, your psychological health, and just your overall well-being and lifestyle, which are extremely important if you want to have a successful physique transformation. So this goes beyond just the bulk. And the reason I say this is because of personal experience. When I've gone through phases of eating poorly and trying to get away with junk food and going to restaurants, it's always proven to have been a worse option than just eating healthy. You just feel sluggish after meals, and your training and recovery suffers from it. So even though it's not directly required for the physical result of building muscle or being in a calorie surplus, it will indirectly affect you during the process. Remember, health is always the most important thing. Next is going to be liquid calories. If you're someone who struggles with appetite and you just can't seem to get the scale to move at all, this is going to be a hack. My favorite options here are going to be high protein shakes and milk. A strategy that's almost guaranteed to work is to just drink milk as your preferred beverage throughout the day. So whenever you're thirsty and would normally go to grab a drink of water, just have a glass of milk instead. This could easily add multiple hundred calories to your daily total and get you in that surplus. Now, of course, still make sure that you're not overdoing it and you're not overshooting that surplus like I talked about already. But this is a tip for those who are really struggling to gain weight, and for those guys, getting fat is almost impossible. Now, when it comes to the shakes, there's a variety of different ways that you can go about it. Many people have many different ingredients that they like to use to get their favorite flavor. But personally, I always recommend the exact same one because it's what I used to have every single day. And honestly, it never got old. It tastes amazing. Just make sure that you're always consuming some calorie-dense foods within it. So for me, it was banana, oats, peanut butter, milk, a date for some sweetness along with the banana, and then some cocoa powder to make it taste chocolatey. It's delicious. It's basically just a dessert, honestly, after your dinner. And it goes down super easy. You don't have to force feed it. And you don't feel bloated or full after. And you can easily consume over 1,000 calories depending on the portion sizes. So you'll have to play around with it and find what suits you best. If you've been plateaued for a while and you haven't been able to gain any weight, I'm certain that one of these strategies or both of them will work for you. So next up is going to be by far the most important part of this whole process, because without it, nothing else is going to matter. And that's going to be your training. Without effective training, if you're eating in a surplus, you won't be gaining any of the lean mass I talked about earlier because your body will not have a reason to build any. If your training is ineffective, then it doesn't really matter if you dial in all the other variables that I discussed in this video, because you'll just be accumulating a ton of fat mass and wondering why you haven't built any muscle. You need to make sure that you're running a proven training system that's structured in a way that allows you to progress effectively. And then your responsibility is to make sure that you're training with enough intensity on that program so that you can then complete the equation and build muscle. This should be a program that includes the big compound lifts done with moderate volume in a moderate rep range. Now, the best way to know if the program you're running is working and that you're actually building muscle is to track your strength progression. This is by far the best metric to use to track this, because it's going to let you know within the shortest amount of time whether you're gaining muscle or not. If more than 2 or 3 weeks have gone by and you haven't added at least one rep to one of your working sets on your main compound lifts, then that's a good indication that something likely isn't working. Whether you're not training hard enough, the program's not good, you're not eating enough or sleeping enough. The only thing that you want to be increasing rapidly are your strength numbers, and they should be increasing faster than the scale. This is how you keep your muscle to fat gain ratio appropriate. And you also don't want to be focusing on the mirror too much because it takes time for visual results to accumulate. And it's a very abstract method of measurement. It's not concrete like strength numbers. You don't want to have to rely on the mirror and guess whether or not you're building muscle. Just stick with the strength and use the objective numbers. So those are all of my bulking tips that allowed me to gain 40 pounds while still staying lean. And if you've made it this far in the video, you should now be ready to do the same thing. So best of luck and go make some gains.